the rest of the afternoon, let's just take it where the discussion goes because we have the supply, the demand, and the minds. So continue. Yes, Jan.
As to never destroying an unreplicated data set, maybe the ZFS destroy command could get a feature that it requires the existence of either a hold, a snapshot, or a bookmark, which would only be created once the replication is finished on the source.
Yeah, I think probably the more sensible way is an extra flag for the snapshot command that would create a hold with a certain name as part of creating the snapshot that you would then remove once it's replicated. That way, as soon as it's like atomically, the snapshot includes the "I'm not replicated yet" bit, and then you take it off once you're sure it's replicated.
So are you saying that there could be metadata for whether I've been replicated and how many times?
You can use user properties to have whatever you want, but my thought here was a hold you create that's created automatically as part of creating the snapshot. So ZFS snapshot -h hold name -r dataset, and all the snapshots that get created also get a hold with that name that Zetla would remove once it's sure there's a copy on another server.
Right.
And then destroy won't work until that hold is removed. Although that messes with my idea of, I don't want to take away Zelta's ability to delete a snapshot, but I do want to take away its ability to remove a hold that I created by requiring 2FA to do it.
Right.
But maybe that's just a special kind of hold or something.
Well, if it's a user property, you can change it however you need to it. It's dynamic, and it's like, okay, here's for this workflow. If this exists, if it isn't needed another workflow, ignore it.
Yes.
Yeah, I think user properties probably make sense because I don't think there's ever going. I mean, maybe never to say never, but I don't think ZFS is ever going to be aware of other systems. I don't think it can be. So, right.
Yeah, replication is unidirectional on purpose.
Yeah, right.
What could be done is you could store in a user property to where each data set has been replicated and then do the deletion with a channel program which reads the user property before it does the deletion.
Right, so if the user property is a list of remote copies of it, if it's blank, then maybe you can delete it.
I heard that you would embed the destination, the property name, as the key or whatever on the reserved domain.
I kind of like that idea because there's also multiple, like, a replication isn't necessarily a backup per se. So there's both the primary secondary failover, which is a set of snapshots, and sometimes I name them differently, depending on the implementation. And then there's the backup. So I kind of want to track both of those things, and I don't necessarily need to replicate every snapshot to every place. So yeah, I think I'm probably not playing with user properties enough, and that would benefit me.
But of course, the ZFS allow command doesn't have any insight into the semantics of your user property values.
Right.
Yet.
So, are you proposing to store channel programs to do access control in the pool or whatever?
Not necessarily, but we could, if there's demand for it, we can come up with some system that makes sense. I don't know if user properties is the best way to do it, just because they're maybe too flexible for what you'd want to be able to do. But I've been thinking about different ways to extend the ZFS allow to be richer for quite a while. I've just never come up with a brilliant idea yet. But discussions usually are where those come from.
Yeah.
So, do you do any offline backup at all, or is all your backup stuff online?
Offline as in completely air-gapped? Or
Yeah, as in this is on cold storage somewhere.
Yeah. So I mean, there still are like tapes in existence, but then they don't get to ZFS at that point. Um, so that's a good question. What do you have in mind?
Well, are we on good? Okay, yeah. So we're actually in the process of switching backup products. And so our vendor is, well, one of their tech people is sitting over on the other side. Um, and because we don't have the resources to keep a copy of everything online. That's just too expensive. And we actually have been writing to tape for a good long time now, which, believe it or not, is actually cheaper still. Although destroying it costs a lot of money, but and so one of the things that we fairly early on found was that basically anything that was going to do online backup, like we looked after I was at this event last year, and someone mentioned that rsync.net was offering a basically you know a ZFS replication target as a service. And it's like, yeah, it's a really good service, and it's like still costs twice as much as what our tape backup costs. And so, it would be great. I understand why it's impossible. It would be great if I could just write ZFS replication streams to tape. But
Well, I mean, you
Right.
could. It would be painful to restore.
I mean, and you wouldn't be able to index them or anything like that.
Right.
Well, you can index from the sidebar. This is everything is well, whenever that goes with a stop, restore the whole thing.
Yeah, so I think that the trouble with that is that like the ZFS replication stream itself is too deep in ZFS that basically you're replicating objects and you don't know necessarily, well, okay, well, this object is a directory, but that doesn't tell you necessarily, certainly in the order that you're actually writing things, or that you're reading things from a replication stream. And you have to have basically a complete ZFS implementation on the receive side just to understand what is in the replication stream.
But you could have the sender run ZFS diff and index that.
That is in fact, so Chris Webb, who is sitting on the other side of the room, that is in fact the thing that he has written for Bacula that we are about to deploy.
But the point of the backup is to be able to restore something.
Right.
And it's not to restore necessarily to restore the whole thing. It's to do small restores. So if you can't do that efficiently, there's another step in the middle that's going to have to occur.
Yeah.
And that's how the vast majority of most of the tape systems handle things.
Yes. So our sort of view of the world is that, well, we have snapshots. So the little restores are not things that we have to go to tape for. The things we have to go to tape for are mostly like this, this file server ate itself, and we need to get all of the data back that was on.
Well, in those cases, would the ZFS replication stream just written to tape not be fine?
It might be if we knew what was actually on the tape when we wrote it. And the other issue is also that it would be really painful to have to go all the way back to tape from 2 years ago to restore a full backup.
Right.
And then restore incrementals every single day for the next 700 and however many days.
I mean, you can write directly to LTOFFs, and it does it. You just have to be very careful on where you put your breakpoints. And you're splitting it on the fly so the tapes aren't beat up.
I mean, there's also if you don't want to have to replicate or apply the incremental from every single day, you can
have a separate stream that is like monthly or yearly incrementals, which is what I do for my personal server. So that way, like, you have all the independent snapshots, but you can also separate, like, you have to store multiple copies of the incrementals, but you can like recycle the daily ones eventually. And that makes
But at that
long-term
point,
restoration
you're
better.
playing Towers of Hanoi again.
So what's the answer overall then? You just have to do fulls once in a while. I mean,
Or
There's-
these differentials.
if we want to do
You-
if
you
you
got to
want,
keep this a bookmark of your last full,
Right.
so you can differential against it regularly enough that the number of incrementals you'll have to restore on top of your full is not inconvenient.
If your content is always growing and never changing, it's a different scenario than if it's changing or being deleted.
Yeah.
That's the key. If it's always, additive, never edited, it's a lot easier to go through this. Once you start going, oh, this file updated 17 times in the last month, I need the 14th one. That's where you start getting into the mess.
right. So if enough is deleted, then the full doesn't hurt quite as much. So if the data is constantly in flux, then the full doesn't hurt. And if the data isn't in flux, then you can keep the history for a million years and it's not quite so bad. I definitely have to deal with both of those things, but not all with tapes.
Yeah.
Our users tend to have a lot of churn.
Mm-hmm.
We tell them very explicitly, please, like, keep your archival data and your like churning daily data separate because that'll make a lot of things better.
Yeah.
But again, our users are grad students, and like, their job is not to make my life easier. Their job is to get a PhD and then leave and go be faculty someplace else. And there's a lot of things that would make our setup better, including for backups, that we can't get them to do because they have other priorities and they don't work for us. I think it may be different in a business environment where maybe, well, okay, you can just go up the management chain and find someone who will buy into this will, save us money or increase velocity or something. It's not something that we can do. We just have to be able to back things up and then restore them when necessary.
Yeah. In any case, this job would be amazing without the clients.
But Garrett, how much cheaper do you find the tapes to be than discs? Especially if you considered for the backup, you might not have to do mirroring like you do for the primaries.
Actually, so for the backup, we do mirroring on tape. So we have one tape that's kept locally in the library and one tape that's kept off-site for disaster recovery.
Right, but I just meant, like, would the price of hard drives get much closer to the price of tape if you were using like a wider RAID Z or something like a D RAID?
I don't know. That's not math that I've tried to do. Right now, tapes are like $100 for 20T. The biggest cost for tapes right now is actually the maintenance on the tape robot,
right,
which we paid for in advance for 5 years, and so we're about to find out how much that costs again.
Good luck.
So we're on LTO 9 now, and traditionally we have skipped a generation of LTO because they have that 2-year readback compatibility. So we went from 7 to 9, and if we can stay on 9 for a while and we can still get support for the robot and the drives, then probably a lot cheaper.
Yeah, 9's not going anywhere. 10's going to screw stuff up dramatically based on the head angle. But from a density standpoint, every time they shift it, the disk to tape cost calculus goes wonky. And you can't get half height drives right now. You won't be able to get them until January, which most of the robots need half height drives. So you can do standalones, which you start transitioning people onto that, and then bring them into robots. But that's just more churn.
Yes, yes. So we're actually looking right now at probably next fiscal year, which starts in July, is when we'll have to start thinking about, well, how do we either, can we get renewal on our, Spectre robot, and also, this will be the point where we have to look at the prices of other storage media for backup. Like, for example, if we wanted to like shove everything into Glacier or something like that. And we'll do the analysis and we'll probably find out that tape is still cheaper.
Yeah, it sounds like quarter the cost plus heat, whatever heat you have to generate to keep the storage, right?
And Jan has his hand raised again.
I can just tell from personal painful experience that when there's a choice between cost of backups and file storage and day-to-day convenience, business chooses day-to-day convenience.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess the cheapest way to do ZFS on AWS would be like an instance with the 10-cent sequential. You could probably use that for backup, but that's still $100 a T. So, assuming it's not mirrored. Should we move on to the salt question? I think opens the doors to conversation about network monitoring in general, and both orchestration and monitoring. And I don't know if there aren't that great options for CFS. I mean, I think Salt is probably the closest one right now, right?
Do we want a 10-minute break or shall we continue?
Oh, break sounds great.
A quick break for, yeah, please. Okay.
So a lot of what you were talking about has authentication, authorization components. How are you feeling about those outside of what's internally in this? Like, is it fine? Because most of the scope I'm used to dealing with authorization is just dealing with what's on the node is important, but you also need to care about authorization in the enterprise. So administrative roles, user roles, like, does it seem fine, or is there any concerns that you have right there? Because I've been nerding out with Michael about getting better authorization integration into stuff, especially on FreeBSD. But generally speaking, I'm trying to understand where the gaps are.
I guess I feel fine, and maybe I shouldn't. So,
Well, if you have the users in the groups that you feel are sufficient, then the next issue is the objects, resources, and the operations controls, which you need that. I can. But
yeah,
that's if you feel like the users in the groups are sufficient.
The role mapping ties to the functions that Zelta's doing. So whether that's at a POSIX level, whether it's at a Etsy password level, or you try to sort that out. I mean, that's just another layer. It should just be okay. I'm speaking for down. I'm assuming it's trusted based upon the OS level of trust.
Right.
Is that role restriction?
and then for reading, at least there's encryption on top of that. So some of the things that we were talking about with with limiting replications unless it's raw, for example, could help with that. I mean, I don't know how a production manager is not going to have access to some of the data. So I mean, I think I think I think at that point it's behavioral. Unfortunately, we can't get all the way down. Yeah, but I mean, we can do 2FA with our SSH logins. There's like a lot of there's a lot of additional protections. It doesn't just have to be a blind key anymore, or ever really. So yeah, I think at some point it's always gonna, and this is why people who are security minded call compliance security theater, is that it will eventually come down to policies and procedures and whether people are really following them. But I'd be curious about technical solutions to that kind of granular control.
Yeah, right now I'm investigating like how to get OIDC, so OpenID Connect. That's what it's called. Yeah, which is just a silly great name. OAuth. But getting that as the authentication system for logins, and then also how on earth you can get that to work with NFA.
Right.
Because, yeah, okay, cool. So I want to hear, it's like, that sounds like a different conversation. Cool.
Yeah. All right. Nice.